guys hear me or see me yet? Maybe not. What is the problem? Okay, let's see. Now we've got it. All right. I think we are officially live. Can you guys hear me okay? I can see on my little tester screen here that it looks like it's working, so... Yeah, all right, cool. Thank you. Thank you, Chuck. Cool. All right. Excellent, excellent. So that's cool. All right, then you guys can see me. This should be like... You should be able to see my hands and stuff, right? Well, welcome. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's really cool to have you all here. I'm going to try to not make it seem like I'm, I don't know, just like actively trying to be Bob Ross. This is actually just how I talk normally. So this is just a little soft. Okay, I can work on that. Let's see. I can bring my... Actually, I could just pull this up a little bit. That would probably do it. Because I want to also speak softly, because like, the kiddos are in bed and everything, so that might be a little bit better. Yeah, exactly. We're going to draw some rocks. That is exactly what we're going to do. So, we're going to do tonight. I've never done one of these large streams before, and, you know, and I'm a little bit nervous about it because, you know, I get a tiny bit insecure about my art skills. I don't really think of myself as like an artist in the way that a lot of people that I follow on online are sort of like real professional artists. I have no actual training at all. I've never taken like a single class or really even like watched videos or anything about it because that's just not really how I learn. I learn best just by doing stuff. So that's what I did a few years ago. A couple of years ago now, I just sort of started doing stuff because I really wanted to. And sort of the first thing I ever tried to draw was stone tools because kind of the only thing I had that was as any kind of guide was a couple of books that I had about lithic illustration. And of course, I'm an archaeologist, so not a prehistorian. I don't usually work with lithics, but I did. I'm just making sure I've got this. It's like mirrored for me on the screen, so I'm going to try not to look at the screen. I just want to make sure I'm centered. You guys can see everything. Yeah, I'll talk about that in a second. What we're actually drawing tonight, which is interesting, and I'll tell you about that in just 1 millisecond. Anyway, so I started doing lithic drawings, and I just still love doing that, and it's actually made me much more interested in just prehistory in general, and I'm going to actually move my paints and stuff for the moment because we're not going to need those for a little bit. So we'll get those out of the way so we can center ourselves a bit more. And it's actually made me more interested in prehistory and in lithics, and I've learned a whole lot about lithics, and I really actually have quite an interest in sort of doing some flint napping. So I know there's a couple people in the audience, I think, who are big-time flint nappers, and I really, 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 really appreciate flint napping. I've tried it a bunch of times, and thus far I've not really succeeded, is what I would say. But I've given it a try. So yeah, on the question about like modern, what I'm gonna draw tonight actually is a modern reproduction that I don't actually have handy. I'm going to be working from a photograph, which you guys can see. I've got it on the screen there, including my little pre-planning hash lines. I always just start with a little crosshatch like this, which just helps me keep the thing in the center. I'm using this interesting size. This is like a 4x8 bit of cold pressed watercolor paper, and trying to keep it centered actually can be a little bit tricky because I'm not, I don't know, that spatially aware in a lot of ways. So this is actually a modern projector point. It's a Susquehanna Broadspear, which is a sort of terminal archaic type here in New England. Somewhere in the neighborhood of like 3,000-4,000 years old. But this is actually a piece that's made by a student of mine who's actually just about to graduate and become dead to me. Yeah, seriously, right? the practice for flint knapping. But on that topic of flint knapping, Anthony is an incredibly talented flint napper, and he actually has an Instagram, which is right there, AG Flint Knapping, which is just very small. It's just, it doesn't have a whole lot of followers yet, but he's a young guy. In his early 20s, and he's one of the best flint nappers I've ever met, and I know quite a few flint nappers, believe it or not. That's in my line of work. You get to know some. Okay, my tea is still boiling lava hot. I'm gonna let that cool for a bit. All right, I should actually get started. In fact, this thing that I've got right here, which is not what we're gonna be drawing, is actually also made by Anthony. He just like gave it to me in the hallway last week. It was obviously supposed to be some kind of a scraper or something, and he accidentally broke it on the very end when he was trying to get rid of this little bit of nonsense right here. The flint nappers in the audience will know that feeling well, and he just gave it to me. He was like, "You just draw this," but that's not what we're gonna draw. We're gonna draw this point from. I have like sometimes just like in my backpack I just have like stone tools, sometimes real ones and sometimes like modern flint knapped examples, but I don't right now. So we're gonna use this image from. So I have my phone here to help me do this with the same sort of image you guys can see, because I really prefer to work from a real point. I find that like way easier, but I don't have that right now. So we're gonna do it from a photograph, which I've done many times. So I always just start out with just kind of some rough like sort of hash lines. You can see I kind of like thought about them a little bit. Maybe I'll start by looking at that on my phone. You guys can actually see my phone, and I'll start with this a bit and just kind of I already kind of thought about the angles a little bit here earlier that I was going to be working with, so maybe I'll stick with that and I'll try and recreate those. As I said before, in no way am I like an actual artist, like a real artist. So I don't know what the hell I'm doing, but I love these Susquehanna Broadspears. I think they're so cool. They're such pretty points, and they have these sort of amazing, expanding stem, this excurvate base with a ground with basal grinding. All my flint nappers in the house will know what I'm talking about. So we're gonna work on getting the shape. And we're gonna end up erasing back like almost all of this. So I can zoom in at my picture a little bit. With strong reflections. I should take a look at the chats every once in a while. Yeah, the whole tip would be gone. I think he's broken the tips off a whole lot of points in his day, and I don't know if he actually is like in the chat. I don't think so. He's not like Anthony is interesting. He's such a phenomenal guy. I love him very dearly. He's like simultaneously like 14 and 72. At the same time, you know what I mean? Like that, he's like kind of an old soul. Like he's the kind of guy who like has a flip phone probably. I don't think he actually does, but like he probably would if he could like get away with it. So, but he's a CRM archaeologist here in New England now, and he's about to graduate. So, but he's also, as I said, incredibly talented flip napper. So we've kind of got the shape down already, right? So we're sort of broad. This is how I always start, just trying to get my shape right. And it's gonna be surprisingly tricky, even though like you'd think a spear point. Like, it's just like a triangle with a little squiggly bit on the bottom. And it is, but I still manage to screw it up much of the time. So we're going to hopefully see how this goes. So we're going to end up erasing back most of this. And I'm actually going to go ahead and take my crosshatch lines out right now. Sometimes I forget to remove those later. And then they're kind of hard to erase when you've already watercolored over the top of them. Not that I've ever made a mistake like that before. I'm much too smart for that. You know what I need? I need my most important tool, my favorite tool. Took out this like brush, this cool little brush that I bought. It's just for getting rid of eraser crumbs. So how am I doing so far? Since I have no idea, like I've never done this before. I've done streaming, always streaming, like playing games. Like I do it kind of, very occasionally, I do a stream where we play Civilization 6, and slowly but surely work our way through that game. And you guys should check that out next time I do it, because it is kind of a lot of fun. But I've never done one of these art streams before. Keep this sort of centered. Okay, here's where we see if this picture is in fact high enough resolution. And the answer is sorta. So hopefully this will work. I can see the major flakes at least, and I can infer. So I'll say for the lithicists in the audience, I know there's some Flint Knappers folks in here. There's some archaeologists in here. I would not consider this to be like a real scientific lithic illustration. These art pieces that I do, they're good. We're gonna see. I use some of the same techniques that we do in that, but the real process for doing that, which I know how to do, and I've done a bit, is like much more meticulous than this. It's less artistic and more scientific, as you might guess, right? And it involves doing incredibly precise measurements using forceps and measuring tools, and you do it in pencil, and then you go over that in ink and transparent paper, and then you scan that. It's a whole thing. It's very cool. It's a very neat process. These are so I'm gonna be like the flake scars and stuff are pretty approximated when I do this. They're relatively close, but they're not. The intention is not to create a perfect reproduction of the flaking patterns, because I am doing it just by eye. The goal is instead to represent the point a bit more impressionistically, right? A little bit more artistically, right? So I would not use these as a like a direct technical. Like doing technical measurements, or something like that. Like you absolutely can do. Ooh, seeing this, I'm zoomed in too far, and I put that too far to the side, running on my. Oh God, I'm immediately realizing that this image is a little bit low quality for what I need usually, but it will be good enough. I should have asked Anthony to send me a better, because this is just ripped off his Instagram account, which I'm sure Instagram compresses everything to hell and back. So yeah, let's see. So my kids are in bed and theoretically, hypothetically sleeping, but it's certainly possible one of them could kind of like appear, and I will mute myself for a moment. So if you see me disappear for a second, don't leave. It just means I've probably just like gone and like helping a child get a drink of water or something. I will be back in moments. So so this is a really it's a very kind of slow process. I guess I'm supposed to be sort of talking about this, right? So the goal that I'm going for here is, again, to somewhat with an artist's eye capture the flaking pattern here. Now, because this is a modern reproduction, you might say, what's the point of that, right? Well, a Flint Knapper as good as Anthony, he actually, when he's doing reproductions like this, he actually recreates the typical flaking patterns and production styles and techniques of the specific point. So he'll look at real examples, like hundreds of them, and figure out, okay, so in this type of point, people use a flaking pattern like this. They tend to work from a center line and kind of move towards the edge, which is a level of historical accuracy that I admire and also am slightly terrified of. So it's still it's still, at least for me, a learning. Like, I've learned so much about lithics. Let me just try this base a little bit too wide through here. It probably is. I think I need to bring this in just a smidge. So I do a lot of erasing. So this like idea that I'm some kind of, if you guys have watched my like my shorts, my little time lapses. Time lapse makes every artist look amazing. It's like magic. It just makes every artist seem so incredibly skilled and good at what they do. It's all phony. I know I'm being humble for this. So this is we've got these two huge flakes here, and I have drawn and painted a number of Susquehanna Broadspears, and again, I have to say I am constantly impressed by Anthony's how he does do that. He really does, kind of make sure that the flaking patterns are correct. I'm gonna erase back these edges and then draw the edges back in with the actual flakes, so that they waistline will be my kind of guideline to make sure I'm still on the ballpark. Whew. Oh man, we got all kinds of chat. That's exciting. I should take a look at the chat. Bite Fracture, yo. Is it an art channel or an art chat? It's both. It's really both. It is an archaeology channel. I do a lot of different kinds of archaeology content. But people, I do a lot of archaeology sort of art stuff, especially these lithic illustrations and paintings. And so we're doing a little experiment. We're doing a teeny bit of an experiment here to see how this goes as a kind of a chill art stream. You know, a little Bob Ross action. I mean, I love Bob Ross. Loved watching Bob Ross when I was a kid. And, you know, Bob Ross is an incredible artist, obviously, right? But, you know, what was memorable about him was just the way he could just make you feel so relaxed and chill. I use an eraser a lot in all the art that I do, to the point that it's actually come kind of almost more of a stylistic choice. I brought this in too far. This is what I mean. I'm very, very off on my measurements here. And if you miss your measurements in any piece of art, because there's also some folks in the crowd here who I know are artists. Yes, yeah. Some time lapses of it. I have a couple of excavation videos up there too. And first of all, it makes me look like I can excavate like 2 levels of a unit in 45 seconds, which I cannot. There was a time when I was faster than I am now, but it does it really just like kind of it makes you look like you are so competent. And of course it only, there is a level of competence there, obviously, because it wouldn't look good when you were done if you weren't doing it competently. So there's a lot of flakes on this, which again is accurate for the terminal archaic. So I did a drawing the other day. I have it in a frame here, but I'm gonna kind of throw it under here for a second. This is my most recent time lapse, and this is obviously this is you can see the light up there. You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna turn that off. I actually think that'll be a little bit better. But obviously this is a Clovis point, and it's also based on one of Anthony's reproductions. Although I have also drawn some Paleo-Indian points, Clovis points from Connecticut, from life, which is fun and exciting because it's such a rare and cool piece. You can tell everything, so you can see now. You can see this is mirrored, right? Because that's I have this the camera's upside down, so right. But I'm going for this same kind of a look, but like Clovis points have so many fewer flakes. And again, that was also based on one of Anthony's reproductions. So same artist, same flint knapper made it, and yet you can see that distinctive difference, which is true because real Clovis points are made kind of with like a level of expertise that very few flint knappers in the past have achieved. They're made so expertly and so kind of precisely. All right, let's not lose track here. How am I doing on my... It's kind of okay. It's kind of okay. A little bit. Yeah, I think that's going to work out. So again, this is my fear, is that if I work up the point here, I might even want to actually, as a kind of like a tactical matter, I'm going to actually move up and I'm going to do some... Let's get a little looser. I'm going too precise. If I go too precise, then the art can lose a little bit of fluidity. So let's get a little speed actually going. Let's not be too terrified, huh? So we've got a big old overshot flake here, which is fun. Again, it's a common feature in these terminal archaic points, like from the Broadspear tradition, from what I've found. And again, Anthony has recreated that kind of perfectly. By off overshot flake, I mean it's like this is a flake that you can see here has been struck. Okay, I'm not expert enough to tell which side it's been struck from, one side or the other, but the flake has traveled all the way across like that. Let's not ruin my painting by drawing all over it. Like that. So that's called an overshot flake. And, some periods have lots of those, and some have very few. Susquehanna Broadspears, which it's probably the type I've drawn from on actual ancient pieces more than maybe any other. Looking at the happy little bite fracture. Yeah, happy. I like that. I like that. Never drawn a predictable point, but many, many, many bones. I'm just starting. If you've been following me on social media, you might notice that I'm just starting to. I really, really want to get better at human anatomy stuff. Partially from like an artistic perspective, in that I want to be able to draw and paint people, which I don't do a lot. I do a lot of landscapes. I do a lot of still lives, object art. Like I'd say this is kind of a part of. But I would like to do more. I'd like to do more. Portraiture and just stuff with like people in it, and that's been pretty. I'm kind of terrified of that, frankly, because I'm afraid of doing it poorly, and so I'm trying to do that. And one of the ways you do that, the best way to do that is, you start, like old Da Vinci style. You start with the skeleton, right? You start by drawing skulls and and all the bones, and then you put the meat on. You kind of deconstruct the body a little bit, and I found that that's been kind of neat. So I've been drawing some bones lately. Been drawing quite a lot of bones, and it's really fun drawing some bones. Gosh, all right. So this is going okay. We haven't had too many issues. We got a weird little kind of cortexy cortical bit here in the middle. So we'll see how we can illustrate that. Big old monster flake right here. Oh, look at how that meets up. It's almost like a puzzle. When you get to these later stages, you find out how well you've done your eyeball measurements, because these flakes have to kind of have to come together, and that one sort of did. Although I'll say that's not supposed to be that far over the midline. This should be more like, I did that a little bit too far in, so it should be more like this. And then there's a huge, just very large flake like this. Oh, we're doing all right. We're doing okay here, folks. We're doing okay. I don't want to keep you, we're probably not going to do this for super duper long this late at night. So we'll see. We'll see how long it takes us just to do this thing. So we got to paint it, and then we're going to hang out with it a little bit. I mean, I'm having a chill time. That tip is a little bit muddy up there, huh? What happened, Bill? I don't understand the tip. How you even make the tip? Seems tricky. You get that little point sort of in there. All right, we'll do some cleanup at the end. Where are we? What are we doing? This whole stretch here has not been even touched yet. So we have this big monster flake. So this comes in like this. There's a really quite deep flake here. So we're gonna have some nice deep lines on that. This actually has some more microflakes. There's also a in a real painting, a real lithic illustration, you would go just like every single one of the microflakes you want to get in there, and with a more kind of interpretive painting drawing like this, I will often leave out quite a few of the microflakes, the pressure flakes along the edge, because they really muddy the image, and which is, again, that's what you're looking for when you're doing a real scientific illustration. But these are not. That's not what these are. They're kind of close to that, right? There's still stuff you can learn from it. There's certainly I've learned a lot. Okay, so here's the point where I go. Did I miss anywhere? It looks okay. So that's stage one. Stage one is we get our boundaries down, and we get our flake boundaries in, and then I usually take a couple of seconds and kind of take a look at the whole point and see if there's any like serious visual issues. Tiny little piece of paper, just tricky to work with. And we've sized this up quite a bit. Probably the real size at this point is probably like that, is what I guess. So we've jumped this up a little bit. Got some nice number of people in here. This is kind of cool. Hey, it's Conan. How's it going? Nothing's up. We're drawing rocks. Not a bad number of people in here for 10 o'clock at night. Although maybe that's kind of a good time. All right, so a lot of the times where I run into issues, I'm going to show you something. Where did that go? I did a little bit of an illustration earlier today. I was kind of getting warmed up, and I did this. This is a very similar. This is also a Susquehanna Broadspear. This is from a real artifact, and I'm sort of okay with the color. The coloration came out okay and kind of fun, but I just feel like the shape ended up kind of just a little bit off, and it's a little heavy. And I tried to save it by coming in with some ink at the end to give it some hard edges, which gave it a bit more of an illustratory feel. But I just don't feel like it's my strongest work. So, I mean, I'm not going to throw it in the trash or whatever. It's nice, but I'll give it to somebody as a gift. But it's not my favorite. It's not my favorite piece. Whereas that Clovis point that I made the other day, I do really like that one. That one came out. I was much more happy with that one, even though they don't look that different. Okay, so we kind of can put aside this now for the most part because that's cool. Yeah, I mean, I'm sort of hoping some folks will just kind of wander in off the street, which is fine. A number of the people in here are folks who I recognize from like social media or from from other channels that I've seen, which is really cool. So, but there are a few people, and a couple people have talked in the chat who I don't already know. Okay, so here's where I am gonna. This is the section of the project where we're gonna borrow most heavily from traditional lithic illustration, because lithic illustration has this very distinctive technique that gives it a distinctive look that I always want to kind of maintain. Even if I am taking a lot of artistic license, and it's captured by these directional lines like that that you draw. This is like I can kind of get myself like a little warmed up here. These sort of directional lines that you draw that, and I'm not the strongest. There's some really good artists who can do this, like, and they're so precise and they're so well evenly spaced, and mine always look, I think, a little sloppy to my own eyes. But the idea with this is to capture the direction and the depth of the individual flakes. So you put in these kinds of, I'm going to try and, actually look at the real piece. And typically what you do is you do a combination of directional lines. First of all, they go with the curvature of which side of the tool you're on. So this flake is scooping out towards the left edge, this one towards the right edge. It's reversed for you guys. And so the curvature lines should go that same direction. And then you also usually put in some lines kind of coming from the opposite direction. And like I actually think both of those are a little bit. Those are pretty sloppy actually, which is not unusual for my first couple of flakes because my hand's not really warmed up to it yet. You get into a little bit of a vibe with it. You get into kind of a headspace where it gets a bit zen, and you can kind of create. You can use this to sort of help really create the notion of a three-dimensional object. And it works quite well for that. And I have no idea if I'm doing this with the exact correct technique. Again, this is one of the things that when you see this on a time-lapse video, it happens like really, 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 really fast. BioArc Doctor, my wife, I love it. Yes, field season is starting soon. I'm seeing that going in. We start, I think May 20th, I'll be out in the field, which is actually a little bit earlier than usual for me because my field school is starting earlier this season, which I'm excited about. So if you're in the Connecticut area, you could come see us. It's a completely public dig at a site, the Henry Whitfield State Museum in Guilford, Connecticut. And it's a public dig. Anybody can come and visit and hang out with us. So you should do that starting on, I think it's May 20th is when we start. Although we won't necessarily be, let me see here. We're using a 0.7 millimeter. I like using a mechanical pencil. Sometimes I use a lead holder, but never really do I use, like artist pencils. And maybe that's sort of being an archaeologist kind of a thing. I use a mechanical pencil all the time. So we have this one It's actually like a series of thinning flakes, but we're going to represent it as a single curvature here at the base. Our sort of basal thinning is oriented this direction, almost like a flute, but it's just that one flake and it's quite small, so it's not really a flute. Eventually I'll come back and we'll do a little. I'm doing this like there's no rhyme or reason whatsoever to how we're doing this. I should probably keep it regular and kind of work my way up each side, but that's just not generally speaking how I art myself. So we're gonna go back to the side. So you kind of get the idea, right? And this part can be quite chill. Here's an important one. This is a big flake and it's very deep. So if the flake is deeper, you want to usually represent that by making your curves a little bit of a broader angle, right? So the idea being that gives that impression that the flake is a little bit deeper. What is the directionality of that bad boy? What do we got there? I guess it's just kind of like this. This looks like something so far. It's all right. It's coming. Let's see if I don't screw it up in the painting section. It can happen. It can, and it does happen. It might. So yeah, again, if this was like a realistic illustration, not only would I be doing this like much more slowly and using all kinds of like calipers and measurement tools to really get it like precisely accurate, I'd also be this would also be done, and then we'd go over it afterwards with ink. Although not on the same paper, usually you use like a piece of tracing paper over the top with a light board. But that's just not what we're going for here. And those can be beautiful pieces of art as well. I've seen ones done that are just incredibly beautiful. I have trouble making those look not very technical, but I haven't done it in a while, so it might come out better now. I'm a little more experienced than I was. Oh boy, those flakes are a little bit flat looking. That's okay. Probably for the best. This is a big boy, so one trick is that like because this flake here, right, has obviously been, it's like an earlier flake that's then been touched up over the top. So you want to try and make sure your curves capture that, right? So it's been covered up by these later flakes. That's what I mean by how I actually have learned quite a lot about like how lithic technology is made just by making these. Am I speaking too low? Let's see. I don't know. Do it. You can do it. Come join us. Oh my gosh. All right. And we're kind of getting there on this stage. And this is starting to look like a kind of traditional, at this stage it just sort of looks a little bit like a traditional, like kind of, a lot of times these look like a little bit of an older fashioned lithic illustration, like one from like the 30s or something like that, because those were a bit less precise. They were usually not being used as like technical analysis things, but were more kind of meant to be kind of evocative, and they were more aesthetic pieces that were supposed to just kind of tell you something about the craftsmanship rather than actually like a modern lithic illustration is a scientific instrument. You can use it to completely reconstruct how the point was made, and oftentimes present that information to an audience in a way that's much clearer than even really, really high quality photographs can possibly capture. And like I said, I do know how to do that. Okay, so I do believe we've got all of our curvature lines in. This is looking a little heavy, which does tend to happen when we've got something with this many flake scars, which typically again, like archaic points in New England do tend to be a bit haphazard in their flaking. You get this, kind of, and like I said, Anthony actually is quite sort of accurate and precise in how he captures that. Now, I like playing with the interplay between the pencil work and the color that we're going to add in a minute. So I do want to kind of capture at least some of the shadow work, just truly by thickening our our line work in areas that are going to be, because in a lithic illustration, I've done this, I've made this slightly off kilter. So like, for instance, I'm going to tell you at the end of this, I'll probably do, let's see, yeah, let's go right about there. We'll go ahead at the end of this, and we're gonna cut that off afterwards. So to make this so the point's actually centered. Not that it has to be, but that's what I was going for. So, but that's okay. It's going to go into a floating frame probably, so it doesn't have to be precise. What am I doing here? What the heck was I talking about? Oh yeah, doing some of the so in lithic illustration, the kind of standard practice, even though this is not what's happening in our image, because obviously this is taken outdoors, just in Anthony's hand, but I'm going to imagine my light source is coming from this direction, and that's flipped. Remember, you're backwards. It comes from the upper left, so you're looking at it mirrored because my camera is upside down. So that's how I had to set up my setup here. So again, I've done that maybe just a little too deep, so if I can actually get rid of that, yeah, it's gonna get covered with paint later, so it's fine. So that's why we've got some kind of shadow work happening here, that our right side of the point, your left, stage right, if you will, is going to be a little bit heavier in shadow to give it a little bit of and I have to decide at the end if I want to give this thing, do I want to give this a little bit of a drop shadow? It would be something like this. Give it a little bit of a drop shadow. We'll decide. We'll decide. Do I have a drop shadow or not? What do you think? What's the audience think? That's something we can kind of decide in a minute when we start doing painting. So we're still going to have some pretty strong shadow work along these kind of entrance points of the flakes. The shadow work is super important, and when you do this with a pure lithic illustration, they do often look a little bit flat, and against that's intentional because they're trying to, but there is still a convention of putting denser lines, in places that would be kind of in shadow. But because we're going to be using color in a moment, we can do one better, and we can actually add our depth and try and get a three-dimensional look by using color. That's what we're going to try and do with our happy little clouds. There's no clouds in this. Happy little flakes. Look at our happy little flakes. So these will actually be like this bottom section of the point will actually be quite a bit deeper in shadow than the top part, because there's a kind of, if we think about this three-dimensionally, there's the sun is going to like kind of strike the point like this, and then there's a boundary here as the point dives down like this towards the base that puts that slightly into shadow. So we're going to go a little bit, there are planes of shadow. We're going to be a bit darker down in this section, and then along this right edge. So the light's going to sort of hit this platform and then be slightly occluded as we get down below it. Then actually it'll kind of come back up into the light a bit, like through here. So we'll see if I've got the chops to make all that happen. That's the plan anyway. That's the plan. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But this, like I said, so we've already started to do quite a bit of our shadow work. And you'll see when we paint, I leave the pencil in pretty heavy, and the lines that come out of these 0.7 mechanical pencils is pretty, the graphite is pretty soft. Not as soft as like an artist pencil would be, but softer than like a number 2 pencil or something by quite a bit. And it'll actually get mixed right in with the ink, and that's where you get some of that smoky look that most of my art has. And I think that's because I tend to draw with a soft pencil and then just paint right over that pencil. It gets mixed in with the ink, with the pigment. I sort of like that look, so I just leave it. Don't try and fight it. Let it breathe, Let it breathe. All right. Let's see. Where are we at? Okay, it's time to start thinking about color. I do believe it is time to start thinking about color. So this is where things get things get real, things get heavy, things get intense. We got water. I'm gonna show you all the parts of what we need. Water. We got paint. So it's very colorful. Isn't that nice? We'll move poor Anthony's misbegotten child over here and get this out of the way. Ooh, criminy. I know. I miss digging anytime I'm not doing it. I haven't worked in CRM since I did CRM when I was younger for a number of years. I worked for a tribal, like internal CRM firm for many years for one of the tribes here in New England, and that was really where I learned most of what I know from the archaeologists there. Okay, there is actually kind of a, before I forget, there's a kind of a something here that I just want to kind of capture with like a little bit of looseness. Okay, so let's put the pencils aside. Stop messing with the pencils, Bill, because you can keep doing it. Tool number 2, a piece of paper towel. It's like my most important tool in some ways. We're going to clear away these old colors, even though we might use those a little bit. Now, interestingly, this is where things get interesting, because not a lot of people do lithic illustrations with color, with paint. So I feel like I'm sort of inventing the wheel when I've been doing this the last couple of years. Here's our paintbrushes. Ooh, we might use more of them, but we're certainly going to use these ones. We got a big one, we got a wide flat one, and we've got like a little bit of a, this is called a rigger is what these are called, and they're like for doing line work, but I just love them. It's like my favorite style of brush. They're supposed to be for doing like when they're wet, you can do like really like precise lines with them, but I actually like kind of like splorting shit. I like splorting with them. That's also quite fun. Oh yeah. Okay. I love all the chat. You guys are, people are just breezing about some old field school memories. And this is a really cool brush. It's called a quill brush, and I don't use it that much, but I've been trying to use it more because it's such a beautiful brush, and it was a gift, and it was quite expensive. It was more expensive than most of my other brushes put together, so I need to use it more often because it's a beautiful brush. Now here's the interesting thing. You guys can see the image of the point right there, and I'm going to look at it too. Now this is Norman Skilchert, and Norman Skilchert is green. That is what we're told. And it's true. Sometimes it does look green, but it's actually got a lot of color in it. There's veins in it that are red. And I'm looking at this piece, and I don't see green there at all. What I see is purple is the dominant color, actually. Like a violet is what I'm seeing most of all. I'm looking at my own image of it here, just on my phone. And I'm seeing a base color that's definitely like blue to gray to violet. So we're going to set ourselves a base wash color first. We'll get ourselves some water. Yeah. Norman Skill. It's a whole mountain range in New Hampshire. It might go down into Pennsylvania. It's definitely, a lot of it's up in New Hampshire, I believe. The stuff that we get here in New England. It's like probably the most common type of chert that we get here in Connecticut, I would guess. Especially again, and Anthony's chosen to use that for this because it is super duper common in that terminal archaic period. We see it a lot during that time period. Okay, so if I'm gonna stick with purple, let's do, this is like a cobalt blue that we're gonna mix in there, kind of a basic, sort of a very simple blue color. So another thing I'll tell you about painting when I do with color, I really like, I have these up here. These are pre-mixed colors in a pan. I really usually prefer to just work from a set of primary colors and mix my own colors. And I mostly do that because I think it makes it much easier to keep like a color theory that hangs together, as opposed to using pre-mixed colors, and you need to like know what you're doing. So so primary colors, let's go back to second grade here for a minute. If we want to make purple, we just mix red and blue. Now I am like too dumb to tell from my pan what that color is going to look like. So for myself, I always need to put it on some actual paper like that. and see what I think it's going to look like. And I actually think that's pretty nice. I think that looks kind of nice. So this is just going to be our base wash. So we're going to put it on very broadly. Now it's going to actively mix with the with some of the graphite, some of the lead, and that'll give it a bit of a smoky flavor, and it hopefully will sort of add the gray that's obviously in this quite naturally without having to actually use gray, because gray is not a color you can, well, it kind of is. You can create neutrals, but gray is usually you just use a separate color for gray, and I want to kind of stick to my primaries here. So, and I don't want to try and mix a gray neutral because I'm not that good at that. So, like I said, I'm using this brushlet recently because it's really nice, but I'm not as comfortable with it as I am with some others. So, just putting down a really simple base here. We might need to truly hang a couple of times here because we're going to be... I do have to wait for sometimes some of these washes we're going to have to let dry. I do have a blow dryer or hair dryer over here, which is very effective for that. Now, what I tend to do is, we get our just base color down. Nice. That looks lovely. Looks like a nice little purpley color. Now, with a little wet on wet, which just means dumping more into this, we can already start to build our areas of shadow and light here. In watercolor, shadow and light is determined not by adding black and white, but by adding additional pigment. There's other ways you could do it with color theory too, but that's the primary way that you do it. If you want to make something darker, you add more pigment to it, and you have to imagine what it's going to look like as it dries. Now, like I said, this section here actually should probably be back in the light, so we're going to pull that back a bit. I found myself more and more recently doing this. We can even bring this section here that's going to be really in the light. We'll draw that back with a bit of paper, and create a little bit of variability here in our spaces, in our color spaces. And things will start to happen here. I think I'm going to probably already transition to a finer brush than this. This is it's got this nice dent, this nice tip that really, if you're skilled, you can do some cool stuff with. But like I said, I'm not very skilled, so instead, we're gonna pop over here to my rigger that I mentioned before. Does that need to be? No, it looks pretty good. So let's see. Again, I'm gonna stick with this. I'm not gonna add any additional color yet. We're just gonna stick this one color. We might be able to do this whole point with a single color. It's got a very flat color here, and that is okay if that's what we decide we want to do. But we'll get there. So I tend to work pretty wet. Keep it in your pants out there, guys. In that, I like doing what's called wet on wet painting, where instead of waiting for your individual layers to dry, you just go ahead and you paint right into the previous layers, still wet sections. I'm going to just kind of flatten that a little bit, and let's bring this up a little bit too. And we can even start because there is still kind of micro shadows. There's like the shadow of the whole piece, and then there's also the shadows cast by the individual flakes to consider, right? So as we move north on the point up towards our light source, which is up here, we get a little bit less light, and as we move, the darkest section is going to be kind of in the depths of our flakes down here at the base, especially on the right side. But the left side's going to be almost just as dark, because this is, again, we've got a nice shelf here on the point that's going to keep this whole base mostly in shadow. I think I'm making myself sound very confident, like I know what the heck I'm talking about, because I do not. I'm just going to keep tapping in a little bit into our flakes. Happy little flake scars. I haven't looked at the chat network forever. How are we doing? Volunteer for our SHPO. For some reason, I love to help with surveys and just what I'm looking at like Chuck. So we in Connecticut we have this thing called called FOSA, Friends of the State Archaeologists, and it's just an organization. Just like it's our state archaeologist is one person. She doesn't even actually work for the SHPO. It's like a separate thing. Connecticut has a kind of a little bit of a weird system, to be honest. She has no support at all. So like 20 years ago, like 3 state archaeologists ago, they kind of came up with this like nonprofit group that just basically supports it, and they have tons of volunteers, and some of them are total avocational archaeologists who've never been paid a dime for doing archaeology in their life, and some of those are some of the best archaeologists I know, like incredible field archaeologists, but lab archaeologists, and just they think deeply about the stuff. They're incredible scientists, and they've just never done this professionally, but it gives them an opportunity to do that a lot of times. One of the best archaeologists I know in the world is a retired fireman, who's never done this, never done archaeology professionally. I'm so liking this. Is looking sort of cool. I'm kind of into this. I am a doctor. That's true. I do not. Okay, so this is a question. I do sometimes ink before I paint. More often in the past. But I have really been enjoying the look of these without the ink, and it gives it this kind of smoky look that I like, and it lets the you do have to be a little bit careful with the amount of kind of brushing you do, because you can essentially just wipe away all of the pencil, and the pencil has to be. You also have to use. You'll notice this is a very diluted paint that I'm using here. A lot of water mix in to keep it and that keeps it pretty transparent, so you can see the line work from the pencil underneath. Oh, see, I like that pencil smear. That's like my favorite. Oh, cyan and magenta. Yeah, yeah. I'm just using look at. Whoo. Hey, JJ, I didn't even see that. Is that you? Is that Anthony? Everybody, ladies and gentlemen, the star of the evening is in the chat. I have been just talking a lot about. I've just been talking a lot about your flint napping. If that is in fact Anthony, I think it probably is. So we've been bragging about your flint napping a lot this evening, and of course, this is one of your pieces that I'm drawing here, which I like to do. I do really like to do real pieces too, but it's kind of nice to do modern pieces sometimes, because ancient pieces can look, the flakes can get kind of like they get so kind of smoothed out that it gets. Modern ones are they're really easy to read, if you will. I kind of don't want to mess with this coloration that much. I kind of like how that looks. I also don't think I want to do the shadow. I'm looking at it on the screen, and it looks good. It looks kind of good. and it's fun. I don't know exactly why, but this blue and this red, you'll notice here, they have separated a bit, and they've separated back out. I don't know why that happens. I'm sure there's chemistry that would explain why that happens. I don't know what that chemistry is, so we're gonna go ahead and just assume that's we're just gonna pretend like that was completely intentional. What if I did something interesting? I got a clever idea. I got myself a clever idea, folks. Let me see. Here it is. What if for our shadow, we got here is a little stylus little. We just blend this graphite in to imply our shadow, instead of trying to paint it in with a corresponding color or I don't know if this is gonna work or not. Let's try it. This is, I can always just erase this back if I don't like the effect. I think I am going to like the effect. I think the effect is kind of cool. Doing this while the paint is still wet is a mistake.
But you know what? What is art if not a series of mistakes that is somehow aesthetically pleasing at the end?
I don't know. Well, I got to think about the shadow. I'm not sure. Ooh, goodness. I will say that usually the last step. I don't like the shadow. We're getting rid of it. We're getting rid of it. Ready? The shadow's going. The shadow's going. Now, can I do this without, again, doing this without letting the paint dry first is absolutely foolish. Just such an error in judgment. If I'm really careful about it, maybe it won't completely ruin the painting. It's not going to ruin the painting. My goodness. We are not going to try and wipe that stuff away. You know, some of that edges, huh? So the pencil smear. Oh, hi, Meg. Well, thank you. That's very kind of you to say. I'm having I like these colors. I really am sort of enjoying how the blue and the cyan and the magenta, the blue and the purple have the blue and the red have kind of like separated themselves a little bit. Now, typically with these paintings that I intend to put in a frame and like give to somebody, I usually do some kind of a wacky, splashy background. So I gotta poll the audience here. Do I do my normal nonsense, and we get kind of wild with the background? I mean, the answer is yes, right? That's the fun part. We're gonna kind of erase this edge back a little bit, and so then the pencil that did not happen to fall under the paint will actually get kind of erased back. Again, the paint's not even completely dry. It's getting there. It's actually pretty. It's pretty good now. Pretty good. Oh, goodness gracious! Oh, the old neck. The old neck's bothering me. Yeah, I just think that color came out kind of fun and smoky. You know, the cheap. I get them at Target. Target has. I showed you this one before. This floating frame right here, and it comes in like black and gold, and they're like $12 a piece. So they're not like completely cheap, but they look really nice, and they're good quality. You know, they're like well built, and the it's not really glass. It's more of a plasticky substance, but it actually does hold the piece in place. They don't jitter around in there too much. Like a basic cold water, watercolor paper is thick enough that they'll pretty well stay in place. So that's what I've been doing. Okay. So here's the question. Now, typically what I do is we'll take a look at our color wheel here. We had our color wheel. Woo! So we are like here, obviously, in the sort of the violet zone. Violet, I guess sort of violet towards red, maybe. And so our complementary color directly across would be something in the kind of green to yellow orange kind of range. So if we mix ourselves a fun complementary color, and let's see, let's do a new color here. Let's say this is the kind of yellow in the same theme, and let's do it. Oh, that red really overpowered that yellow, didn't it? Let's get that's orange, man. Wow, that's orange. That's just aggressively orange. What does that actually look like? That's kind of a pretty color. How's that look in contrast? That's too red. That's like almost blood, isn't it? Let's pull that back a bit. Let's try that again. I'm usually not very choosy about my color. I kind of like let it ride. Oftentimes, I'm mixing this different yellow a little bit. It's just like a much cooler yellow. I think this is Azo yellow. Let's see what that gives us.
that's a kind of a fun color. How's that look in contrast? That's pretty bright, right? Yeah, they're not the best frames in the world, but they kind of do they do the business. All right, now typically, what I like to do, we're actually still not going to use this brush. I love this brush. I haven't used it like at all. Let's go back to our big boy, and we're going to really thin this because we want this color to be quite delicate. I mean, we're going to really, that's a lot of water. We're really going to lighten that up. Get a little bit more of this azo yellow in there. Okay, right? And so here's what we're going to do. We're going to get a little bit impressionistic with it, right? We just get a little color in there. And we're just going to kind of let that flow through to the other side. And don't worry, we're not done with this yet. We'll have some fun with it. Right? And a little bit of movement, I would say, in this direction. So, and then we can even just really we'll let this wet on wet kind of do some fun stuff for us. Let the paint kind of be in there a bit. And we do want to probably just get a little bit of that orange red. This is madness. I know that this is like utter madness, this section. It's also kind of the fun part. And then we'll just kind of hang for a minute while we let that dry, and you guys will get to watch the magic happen. Let's see, do I want to mess with that at all? How do we feel about that? I bet that dries kind of pretty. I'll bet. Let's take it a little bit back this direction. That will give it a bit more of that flow. Am I an artist yet? Does this make me an artist, doing nonsense like this? How long have we been going? I don't even know what time it is. Lord. 10:18. Oh my gosh, we've been going for an hour. Holy crap. Oh, goodness. What if I reposition our light a little bit? That doesn't make much of a difference, does it? So you guys can maybe see that a bit better. There's a bunch of stuff. This is not hot press. This is cold press. I'll show you the paper that I'm using. It's this Fabriano 1264 stuff. Again, that's backwards. Sorry, that's mirrored. But it's cold press. I actually prefer it like as cold press as I can get it. I really like the rough textures. My preferred. But I think I used so much water that it's sitting on it almost like a hot press. But that's okay. That's going to give it the look that I want. I want it to have a really washed out, gentle sort of a look back behind the point. What else we got? So the chat is hopping. I got to take a look here. Appreciate you're lefty. I'm sorry to say this, Meg, but I am not a lefty. I have misled you. My camera is upside down. That's how I was able to get this set up, and so the image is mirrored. So I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm actually not a lefty. I'm a righty. But I've given the impression that I am a lefty because of this necessity to make this work. Sometimes I just go back and I just kind of encourage the colors around in the way that I want. I want to make sure that they kind of press up against the point in most places so that they look like they're going behind it, even though we didn't. I mean, you could put this down first and use like some kind of a frisket or something like that. I find that to be really messy. Oh, what else we got? Phew. The paint on the right and then the water on the left is making me scared. Yeah. Oh yeah, because it's like I'm going across the painting with it. It's all right. I probably even at the end we might even do a little bit of splatter. We might throw a little splatter on this thing just to get wild. This is the beautiful thing is that now that I've been doing art for a couple of years, I feel confident enough that I don't feel super anxious. That it's like, oh, I did a thing that I think looks kind of nice. What if I ruin it? It's like, I could do it again if I need to. But the fear is real. The fear is real. Let's see here. Maybe I can even do a little bit of pulling some stuff back. You can add just like a little bit of texture to things with by using the paper towel. I could also grab like a sponge and do something similar, but that's okay. We'll use what we've got in front of us. We're just hanging out now. Oh my gosh, there's so many more things in the chat. Greetings from Zimbabwe. What? Wow. That's cool. 4:15 in the morning. Oh lordy, it's getting late here. I'm going to bed after this. But 4:15 in the morning is rough. But thank you. It's really kind of you to say. I love doing those bursts. I would if this was a lot of fun. I'll probably almost certainly do more of these. And I would like to do one where I do like a bird painting or like just some other things, landscapes or something. Doesn't always have to be this more archaeology based stuff. That just seemed like a good place to start since most people are following the channel because they're interested in archaeology. That's what that's what the channel's called after all. So there's I figured that's where I would start. But is there anything I want to do with this? I don't know. It looks all right. I don't think I will do the spatter stuff. I think that's probably one too many elements if I start going back and adding stuff like that. Now, I mean, I'm tempted. I got to be honest. I'm slightly tempted to go back and just touch in a little additional shadow work, and I might just do that. Just push some of these values a tiny bit. We've lost. I've got to remix this a bit. This is where this is my hysterical tinkering here at the end. But it's okay. It's okay. We're just gonna put in a little bit of that's gonna spill into the background color if I'm not careful. I like to live dangerously. I think painting watercolors of all the art forms forces you to live dangerously because watercolor has a mind of its own. It does what it wants a lot of the times, and you gotta get chill with that. You've got to vibe with that it has a mind of its own sometimes, and it does what it wants, and you just encourage it to do what you would like it to do. And you're in a kind of you're in a bit of a collaboration in that sense, is what I'll say, which is a ridiculous thing to say. I am sorry about not being a lefty. I have lied to you all. This is because of my strange setup where my camera has to be upside down so that I can get it into the frame. A Mississippian shell gorge at water. I've done a couple of paintings of stone gorgets and things like that, and it's really a different animal. I don't know if I ever actually painted one. Yeah, I guess I have once or twice, but I've done them in pencil a number of times. I've never done a shell one, but yeah, I would like to really expand to be able to do all kinds of different artifacts. I've done some historics too. I've done some ceramics and things like that, figurines and stuff. But that's all in due time. All in due time. So, I mean, it's really just a matter of letting this thing dry. I'm probably not going to play with this anymore because it's sort of okay. And I don't know how to tell you when you know that a piece like this is done. You just sort of know. You just go, yeah, I guess that's good enough. And that's it. And that's done. That's how it ends. I mean, I could do this. I could go ahead and I got a sort of a blank space here. So we could sign it like that. Look at that. Oh, I mean, that makes it art. It's backwards still. I'm sorry. So now you look at that. I can sign my own name backwards. That's a skill that, how many people can really say that they can do that? So, I guess, what we'll do is I'll wind it down. I'm just going to let this sit and dry and probably just leave it overnight, and it'll dry down, and the oranges and the yellows will do some fun things as they continue to dry, and which hopefully, because the whole point of using that complementary color where we've got this yellow orange, which is bouncing off of this violet, kind of violet to blue color here. So we've got a very warm complement in the background to this much cooler color palette on the actual artifact. It's supposed to make it kind of pop. It gives it even more of a three-dimensional look. And I'm glad that I erased back the shadow. I don't think it needed the drop shadow. I think that distracted. It was too much. It was one element too many. So I'm happy with that choice. And like I said, I'll trim this bottom section here so that it's nice and centered. And it'll probably go into a very similar frame to the one I showed you before. Yeah, I hope this was kind of chill and relaxing. I'm gonna definitely do this again. And thank you, thanks guys, that's so nice of you. And I really this was like genuinely kind of fun, and I liked just chatting about it's you do art, and like it's a very quiet activity usually. You're usually like totally silent by yourself, just and it's very relaxing in that way. I would never change that. I love that part of it. But it is kind of fun to think out loud, like my process. Because again, like I said, I'm not like an artist. Like I have no training. I don't really know what I'm doing. So it's kind of fun to it's really fun to think out loud some of that stuff. Oh, you guys are really nice. Super nice. And we had a nice little, we had about 13, 14-ish people in for almost the whole hour. That's not bad. I'll take that any day of the week. This is about as good as we get when I was playing video games. I think if I do this with a little more warning, this was very like I just put up an announcement about this like less than an hour ago. So if we do this again, I'll do it with a bit more warning, and maybe we can even get some more folks in here. But just thanks for being phenomenal and having such a great time in chat. And if you missed any of this, or anybody who you think might think this was cool, basically as soon as we log off, this will go up onto the channel as a recording, as like a VOD, the whole thing, so you can go back and watch it, or share it with somebody. It'll just be there for anybody to watch. So feel free to do that. And thanks everybody. Have a phenomenal evening.